Welcome to this David J. Fine Distinguished Visiting Professor event. To lead us in this vital conversation, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our moderator and the 2025-26 David J. Fine Distinguished Visiting Professor, Dr. Victor Montori. Dr. Montori is the Rewald Professor of Medicine at Mayo Clinic and a world-renowned endocrinologist and healthcare researcher. Dr. Montori is a self-described care activist. He has dedicated his career to championing careful and kind care, an approach that prioritizes the human being over the bureaucracy of healthcare. Dr. Montori is a leading voice in ensuring our systems of care lead to true human flourishing. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Victor Montori.
Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here at this panel on the world, what the world needs now. I feel like starting to sing. Care as a vision, resistance, and hope. I think today we gather at a moment when many of our institutions and communities are confronting deep divides from social isolation, systemic inequities, environmental harm, and political violence. In response, this panel invites us to reflect on something fundamental yet often overlooked, which is care. Care not just as an idea, but as a guiding vision for the kind of world we want to build, a form of resistance to forces that fracture our social fabric, and as a source of hope that connects us to one another. Drawing on the foundational definition by Tronto and Fisher that care is everything humans do to maintain, repair, and improve our world so that we can live in it as well as possible, our panelists will explore care as a lens, as essential work, and as a transformative orientation toward human and planetary flourishing. We'll hear insights from experts whose work spans family and community well-being, social work and democratic practice, gerontology and long-term care, health equity and policy and community engagement, bringing both scholarly depth and lived experience to this exploration. Their bios, I believe, have been distributed. Is that true? Yes, and so I will not introduce each of them, and instead we'll use the time to first hear from each of them and then engage in discussion with my questions and then the questions from the audience. My hope for this, and there will be microphones for that purpose, my hope for this discussion is that we leave not only with a deeper understanding of care, but with practical ways to cultivate it in our research, our teaching, our practice, and our everyday lives. So let's begin, please, by offering a warm welcome to our panelists. First off, Dr. Jessica Toft, and I actually was supposed to check with all of you that I'm okay to refer to each of you by your first names.
Yes.
Joey's a little concerned about that.
No, I'm not concerned.
Very good. Okay.
Not concerned.
So Jessica's an associate professor in the School of Social Work, and we'll first start with her remarks. You want to use the microphone?
Sure. Yes, I can sit. Fantastic. That's care right there. Well, hello, everybody. Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to be part of this panel with my distinguished colleagues. And thank you, Dr. Montori, for this invitation and the work by Katie White.
First names.
Oh, Victor. Sorry, Victor. First names. And Katie White and the team for bringing this all together. To begin, I want to comment on the title of this panel, Care as Vision, Resistance, and Hope. I think this is a provocative statement as it counters the 45-year neoliberal ethic in which care has often been treated as invisible, powerless, and devoid of moral courage. Neoliberalism is a political reasoning in which market logic is applied to governing and governance. And first, it consists of governing that protects and advances markets while shifting economic risk to the public. Second, it consists of governing that shrinks the welfare state while imposing disciplinary state so that people would be forced to take up low-wage and precarious work. Third, it consists of a governance of the self in which deployed narratives shape society's members to behave only and always as economic actors. Neoliberalism's tenets include self-interest and competition, needs satisfied only through transaction or contracts, continuous stance of an entrepreneur, individual responsibility, and acceptance of a state of insecurity, risk, and consequences. This neoliberal economic actor does not recognize the social and political connection of people, Margaret Thatcher, a famous neoliberal, stated, "There is no such thing as society, only individual men and women." In the 1980s, neoliberal policy and governance ensued, and the 1981 Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act transitioned several universal benefits to states as means-tested assistance, representing the largest cut to social spending to date, roughly 25%. Block granting to states stealthily ended attached citizenship entitlements, and a decade later, the 1994 Contract with America forcefully attributed poverty to individual fault with a mantra of personal responsibility, and proposed further welfare state limits and work enforcement. And in 1996, Congress replaced aid to families with dependent children with temporary assistance to needy families, ending entitlements to public assistance with requirement to work to earn benefits. This would accelerate the use of state disciplinary muscle by attaching citizenship benefits to work and a high risk of sanctions. In fact, accessing public assistance became so onerous that while 68% of eligible families sought AFDC in 1995, lifting 58% of children out of deep poverty, by 2020, only 23% of eligible families even sought TANF, lifting only 14% of children out of deep poverty. Since the 1980s, neoliberal political reasoning has made incursions into ideas of collective care, the welfare state, and rights of citizenship. And yet we are so used to this model after 45 years, we can hardly think outside of it. And today, in addition to neoliberal hegemony, we now have other threats to our democracy. The Economist Intelligence Unit provides a score on the health of a democracy and is a division of the Economist Group that provides political and economic intelligence and advisory services to business, governments, and organizations worldwide. And although we were a full democracy in 2016, we are now considered a flawed democracy due to declining public trust, increased political polarization, governmental and institutional dysfunction, checks and balances breakdown, and influence of money in elections and lobbying. In fact, several scholars maintain we have entered a period of illiberal democracy, the tenets of which are leadership is best vested in a strong individual, leaders know what's best for the people, the exercise of power is not contingent on another branch, rather it is an entitlement of those destined to wield it, and it should not be questioned, impeded, or restrained. Individuals are not equal. There is no general right for self-rule or majority rule. Natural hierarchies exist. Civil society is not free. It is controlled by traditional or religious order that are seen as unalterable. Democracy is unnecessary to political well-being. In fact, it is inimical to it if it impedes the leader's pursuit to good society. Unfortunately, the honed tools of neoliberal disciplinary state can be taken up and intensified by an empowered, unchecked executive branch. But, here's the good news comes, and another older political reasoning is that of democracy, in which governing and governance is based on equality and full political inclusion of people. This governing model is animated by social and political actors, and the tenets of a functioning liberal democracy include popular sovereignty by the people and for the people, and this requires free and fair elections. The rule of law anchored in a constitution, statutes, and court decisions. Political equality of citizens and full inclusion into the polity. People are not merely self-interested, they are social and in association, and they can strive for a common good. Human beings are invested with rights that are derived within governments, instituted and consented to by the people. And a free and functioning civil society is necessary, a public sphere for deliberation, academic freedom, politics, association. This is a site of social solidarity. In this imaginary, humans do not have to earn their rights. In democracies, rights are not the result of a fleeting contract of exchange. They pre-exist. They are enduring, and they are derived within governments, instituted and consented to by the people. They are public goods. In other words, care is envisioned in our democratic framework, and our task is to continue to partake in it. Democracy should be thought of as a verb. As a social work professor, social welfare historian, and macro practice social worker, I see social work as a profession that extends democracy to places where people have been pushed to the margins. I understand that the profession of social work is not fully understood by many, so let me help. Our code of ethics begins, the primary mission of social work is to enhance the human well-being and help meet the basic human needs of all people, with a particular attention to the needs and empowerment of people who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty. A historic and defining feature of social work is the profession's dual focus on individual well-being in a social context and the well-being of society. Fundamental to social work is attention to the environmental forces that create, contribute to, and address problems in living. Our 6 core values include service, social justice, dignity and worth of the person, importance of human relationships, integrity, and competence. Social workers are the largest provider of mental health therapy. We are in schools and hospitals, and we assist persons with disabilities to stay in their homes. We counsel those with eating disorders, gambling addictions, substance use, and we guide people and their families through end-of-life hospice care. We support those who have been trafficked. We advocate for women and all persons in domestic violence situations, and we lobby for food security and affordable housing. We speak out with and on behalf of LGBTQ+ folks, and we provide resources and services for refugees and immigrants. We facilitate grassroots organizing to challenge unjust social conditions like undrinkable water or unfair eviction policies, and we are committed to the well-being and political inclusion of society's members. We have a 125-year-old history, some of which unjustly and shamefully treated Indigenous people and people of color. And we also have a history which served the interests and the people by extending rights, protections, and services to everyday people. And the vast majority of us are women, and we boast the largest proportion of people of color nationally in any collegiate-level profession. I want to share some of the recent stories of democratic care from social workers, students, and instructors. When elementary students stopped showing up for school in January, social work interns went into the community to reach their students and support families. This includes providing food, rent supports, and even helping parents fill out the delegation of parental authority documents in case parents were taken away. Some of these students are simultaneously concerned for their own safety due to racial profiling. I know of a social work student in our master's program who witnessed the shooting of Renee Good. This student then trained to be a constitutional observer and observer dispatcher. She later watched as a man was forcefully pulled from a restaurant by ICE. As she composed herself in the parking lot, his son arrived. She introduced herself and helped him find an immigration attorney to file a habeas corpus petition, which succeeded in relieving him from detention. And this young man now completes these petitions for people in his community who have been wrongfully detained. This student now provides support to people who have been released from detention, and she is emotionally exhausted but steadfast. I know of a faculty member who lives in a heavily surveilled area. Neighbors have built systems of mutual aid. They patrol the neighborhood, provide food and rent. They have assigned buddy families to families who need escorts to school and other errands. And they tag team because this work takes a toll. Many social workers and social work students are living their own stories of care for others, and they volunteer, they intern, and they engage in their work in the belief that there should be service and social justice, and this does require a functioning democracy. The resistance in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and across the state, and collective action against the violent actions of the state is an echo of past movements of civil society and a hopeful harbinger of the future. We can work in collectives and in associations. Every act of resistance is a gesture of care offered to individuals, neighbors, and community members, but it is also an exercise and symbol of the hope found in a functioning democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Next up, Ty Mendenhoop, Professor of Family and Social Science, the College of Education and Human Development.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm a professor in the Department of Family Social Science. I also have a foot over in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health, which is where I'm clinically connected. And I think that combination is the launching pad, if you will, for why I'm here today. My work in integrated medicine is driven by what we have coined over the years citizen health care, which I think is appropriate for a lot of the work that we're up to now in this discussion. Across a variety of different presenting problems, diabetes, smoking cessation, intimate partner violence, chronic pain, depression, and others, and across a variety of different communities, from low income to high income, white, American Indian, Hmong, Laotian, Vietnamese, Thai. We are driven by a mantra that we call have model, will travel. And all of these different initiatives that we do look different qualitatively, but they carry the same common themes that drive us. And off of the top of my head, in our professional stuff, we have several of them listed, but the principal ones are as follows. Interdisciplinary work instead of multidisciplinary work. If you go into literature, multidisciplinary just means that you're all there. It doesn't mean that you're talking to each other or collaborating, which is a good start, but you need to do more. And interdisciplinary work is driven by these biopsychosocial spiritual understandings of health. Just like depression can be from not enough serotonin in your brain, to attachment injuries, to abusive relationships, to housing insecurity, or to job loss. You can't just fix depression with medicine or attachment work or trauma-based work or helping somebody find a job, because the source and the solution can look in, obviously in a lot of different ways. So none of us can go to school long enough to do all of this, right? I mean, you can't become a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a family therapist and a social worker and, an advocate. By the time you're finished, you're retiring, right? And so we do work unapologetically together in these interdisciplinary teams. But this is, I think, the most innovative, and for me, the most humbling and the most exciting part, is that we don't stop there, because our patients, their families, and the communities represent the greatest untapped resource in healthcare. And I do not care how many letters you have at the end of your name, how many credentials you have, how many hits you can get on Google when you search your name, and I think all of us have. I mean, let's just be honest, right? If I don't live with a chronic illness, if I don't live in poverty, if I don't live in the context of racism, I can't read enough books about it to get it, okay? And we need to have our patients and families at the table in a flattened hierarchy, all hands on deck way, that we as professionals have our expertise on tap, but it is not on top. Okay? And when we do work that way, we lean into the messy. We like messy. Messy is where the work really gets done, right? And we're able to create and advance and evaluate and then iteratively go back to the drawing board and do it all over again and refine these things in flat hierarchies where everybody is contributing and everybody has a co-ownership and responsibility for the outcomes. Okay? And we've done this with the Partners in Diabetes Project, the ANGELS, a neighbor giving encouragement, love, and support. Everything's acronyms. The Santa Project, Students Against Nicotine and Tobacco Addiction, and on, okay? But I think that the energy and the contribution of these is such that again and again, we get people's attention because it's innovative, and yet, like you were saying, it's really going back to what this is all about. I mean, I'm not sure this is innovative versus just reclaiming what got lost somewhere along the way, okay? And that's one of the reasons that I loved your question, do you call me Dr. Mindenhall? Of course not. I mean, I was Ty a long time before I was doctor. And we can't work collaboratively when we start hierarchies really in some of those discussions. I have something to contribute. Yes, I went to school for a long time, but I can't do it all, okay? And across these initiatives, I think that, and putting the academy lens on it for a second, and I think this is really important because in order to do this work well, we have to be constantly and vigilantly humble and aware of our arrogance. Graduate school gets us there. I mean, we get socialized to be the expert. We get socialized to be the leader. We get socialized to have the whole group look at us as soon as a question comes up if we're all sitting at a table. And we can't do work that way. At least not, in my opinion, good work that way, okay? And so as we go forward in these things through that academy lens, there's a couple of things that I've really had to relearn. First is that if you go on to like any good academic, Google Scholar or PubMed or, wherever you do your review of the literature, right, with articles that you can't access unless you're part of the university. You ever notice that? I mean, that's also a problem, okay, is that literature is full of community projects, of collaborative projects, of community-engaged scholarship and these projects, I mean, I'm not saying that they're bad. It's just that they're by definition temporary because they live and die on an external grant that some expert with a whole bunch of letters at the end of their name, again, got. And if it's not the expert themselves, there's somebody else that's very charismatic leading it. And as soon as they retire or die or are courted by another university and they go away, the project stops, right? And if your project lives and dies on external funding, or if your project lives and dies on one single charismatic leader, I would argue that, yeah, I mean, maybe it's a good project, but it's not a permanent project and it doesn't pass the sustainability test. Okay, and all of those projects and others that I've rattled off, here a minute ago, they work with and without funding. They have long histories of this. They have multiple generations of leaders. Okay, and that's the point. If it's co-owned and if it's community-owned and operated, it needs to function with and without funding because we can't stop our work when a grant runs out. Right? And this is hard in the academy where you're rewarded up the chain from assistant to associate to full professor in every annual review based off how many grant dollars you got. And if you're doing it right, they don't need the grant dollars, right? Or if you're doing it right, maybe you shouldn't always be the leader. I was advised earlier on to not do this work until I had tenure because I wouldn't be rewarded in the right ways. And I kind of did it anyway, which was, I don't know, maybe you can psychoanalyze that, right? But I think that really is where the beauty is of the work. And over again and time after time, this wisdom is realized. Again, like I said, as one of the guiding principles, professional expertise is on tap. It's not on top. Okay? And ironically, by the way, some of you that might be getting stressed about grants, is that we've received a number of grants when funders have realized that we don't need them. Because we would propose, and we have, and we've said it in a professional way, but literally what we say in the grant proposals that we write is that we sure would love it if you funded us, but if you don't, we're going to do it anyway.
So far we've heard from Jessica and Di, and I want to make sure that we keep coming back to the topics of care, and we've heard that a version of care is one that actually emerges from people coming together in democratic and participatory and ways in which experts contribute but not necessarily lead all the time. Next up, Manka Kinveg, Assistant Professor, Division of Health Policy and Management, School of Public Health.
Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for being late. I don't think I heard the question, so.
Yeah, well, there's no question yet, so
Okay.
we're basically having initial remarks.
Oh, okay. So I was late because of a care activity I had to do today. And what I consider care, it's really deeply tied to culture for me. I come from Cameroon, West Africa, and we are a collectivist culture, so typically you hear about Ubuntu, which is I am because we are. So what you do for yourself is what you're doing for everybody. What you do for another person is what you do for yourself. So that's the kind of principles in which my work has been built, and so everything I do is around care. So it goes back from when I was in Cameroon, I wanted to be a physician, and that's because I had seen there was a need for healthcare practitioners in the village that I grew up, and so my goal was to become a provider to care for the community. And then I migrated to the United States, went to school to become a nurse because I thought that was the closest way to get into clinical care before you became a physician. But as I was going through that process, I realized that the way I could care for my community in a much better way and leaning on my own skills and expertise and kind of traits that are natural to me was nursing. And so I went into nursing care, and I became a nurse at a community health center doing that. And as I was doing that, providing care to patients at a federally qualified health center, which is, if you know, those are the most minoritized and the most disproportionately impacted in the community, I realized that people were having to choose between medications and food, and at the time I was thinking, what's going on? There's something wrong where if you have diabetes, you have to choose between your medications and buying food that you need for your disease management. And then I realized that there was a care need there that needed to be addressed, and I was like, policy is the need. So I went to school to get my master's in health policy so that I could improve policy towards supporting those people while I was getting my master's, I realized that policies are not made just by, hearsay. They're made and informed by research. And so that's how I went to get a research degree so that I could potentially care for a larger section of the community through doing research that informs policy. And so that's the work that I do, and that's how I see care. Care is what we do in everything that we do, not just the person at the bedside, not just the researchers. Even in my research, the way we do research is also care. How are you talking to that participant? How are you engaging with that participant? Are they being heard? Are they recognizing that this research is not just being done to be published in a journal or something? All of that I consider care, and so it's kind of the way that I approach all my work. And going back to where I was this afternoon, we are launching a new initiative to train community-based organizations and community leaders to be ready to partner with researchers. And that's kind of where I think it's critical. To be able to care, we have to involve those who are the intended recipients of whatever thing we're doing in the process. And that's why community-based participatory research comes in, that you're working in partnership with communities to do the research, to develop the intervention, to develop the program, and to ensure that the community is ready to be able to partner with us researchers from the academy. We need to ensure that they themselves know the research process. And that's the work that we're trying to do with this new initiative, where we're getting community organizations together to help them understand what the research process is, so that when we in the academy approach them to do research, they're willing and ready and they know what the process entails, so they're able to come together with you to do the work that improves the health of the community. And so in putting all of that together is really, care is not something that is outside of us, it's something that we do, and it's something that we do in our everyday life. So whatever field, a clinician field, a social worker, a teacher, we are doing that every day, and it's really about being intentional about how we approach that process to ensure that we're responding to the needs that are coming from the community, because that's how I do it. And
Thank you very much, Micah.
And I've got a new role, and my colleague Manka is now leading in the Center for Healthy Aging and Innovation, our community engagement and equity work. And as you can tell, she is the perfect person for that job. I am working on disseminating dementia caregiving programs. And they're the programs where we're building capacity in the community. And so I just had the opportunity to meet Dr. Montori, and we had breakfast, and we started with the regular way that you introduce yourself. You know, you're all hyped up, you're meeting somebody, it's like, oh, wow, this is great. And you say, this is the name, the rank, the department, and these are my grants and my projects. And I said, so is this what I'm gonna talk about? And he says, no. I said, oh, okay. So I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, Robin, I don't want you to speak today from an academic or research-centered perspective about the multiple grants and these projects that you're working on. What I want you to do is speak from the perspective of the communities that you work with. What is important in the care of the individuals and the families and the communities? And so I had to go home last night and ponder this, and all of a sudden at 3 a.m. I woke up, had an idea, and put a few notes together. So that's what we're gonna share here. So the first thing that I want to say about care is, like Dr. Manka, I just grew up in a culture of care. And I had the great honor of, my mom was initially from a little town called Beebe, Arkansas, outside of Little Rock. And I spent 12 summers with my grandparents. And it was back in the day where your grandparents, I would want to be on a bus or a train, the last day of school, and I would not come back until one day before school started. And when I think about it, I was like, how did that work? Well, how it worked is that I had a grandfather that had been disabled working on the railroad and had been homeless since 9, and he ended up getting emphysema because everybody smoked back then. So there was somebody in the house, and then my grandma was working, but I just was always just loving and intrigued because my dad was at Boys Town, and we didn't know that side of the family. And so I just have grown up always with now we have 4 generations. I have great grandchildren, if you can believe it. And I just adore them. They visit every Sunday. But like what Manka was sharing, care is just embedded into everything that I think of and do. And I often get so hurt and disappointed because it's not that way for everybody. And so part of what I want to talk about is how our internal work impacts the care that we can do. And so lots of times there's the grant pressures, as Ty mentioned. You're worried about sustainability. People move. You get right in that organization, and now the executive director goes someplace. So there's a lot of those things that do impact care. But what grounds us is when we start with ourselves. And so I put together just a few notes around this. What I said is, if we want to make care better, we must first look inside of ourselves. Transformation of care begins with us focusing our lens in our mirror. I want to repeat. Transformation of care begins with us opening our lens and looking in the mirror. And so there's a very popular song that was written in the 1980s by Glenn Ballard and Sahida Garrett. And that song touched people around the globe. The theme was, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look in the mirror and make that change. And I think that anthem that was later sung by, it was developed for Michael Jackson, is very relevant. Music is one of those areas that helps me during these stressful, traumatic times. And the songs still resonate with a lot of the things. And so part of that song talks about, in a world filled with hate, we must still dare to hope. And it talked about bringing our joy, having our self-love, and looking at those things that unite us. And so when I think about the person in the mirror, each one of us and our mirrors, we have to take a look and say, am I going to make a change for once in my life? Is it going to feel real good to make this change? And can I make a difference? And can I make it right? And I believe that all of us have the capacity, based upon the talents we were born with, based upon the talents that we have developed through our lived experience, our academics and those, to have that, to make that change. And when I reflect on where we are right now, it is a very difficult time. When I look at everything we've been through here, not only globally and across the United States, but especially here in the Twin Cities, I am just raw. And I have to say that where I live in Columbia Heights is where they took Liam from. And we also have 4 other children that are gone there. My grandson and my grandkids, they're Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and they are focused in on that whole corridor. So I just spent my probably $375 now in a Lyft, because I do not feel comfortable with the way that I can get blocked in and the harm that could come from that. So that's a reality for me. But I don't let that reality distract me from where I can make a difference. And so there's some things that we can't immediately change, but we can't let that take us away from those that need our care. And when you're doing work with and for and in conjunction with community, it grounds you. And so it's a salve right now for what's going on in the world. And when I think about where we are as a country, I feel like we've lost some of our moral compass. And somehow things have gotten divided. I grew up just with the we, and we is everybody. And that's the way I look at things. And if I am doing great, but I see my neighbor, like I live in a 55-plus building, and a couple of them with the increase in the insurance rates, their food budget is gone now. So we now have people going around in my 55-plus business building, like a person came over and brought me the chicken pot pies they had gotten from Sam's Club because they wouldn't fit. And then I called up a friend who's now been unemployed for 2 years, 63, great friend, great worker, but people don't want to let her work because of the age-related stigma, and I gave her that food. And then she was supposed to start a new job today, and I was so excited. And I called her, and they canceled, And what they do is they're doing group interviews. You know what the group interviews that lets you do? It lets you look at all the people and then say who you want. And you're doing that based upon those judgments. So there is a lot of suffering, and I think we really, as we work on care for our community, we have to recognize the trauma that exists, the challenges that exist, and give grace and recognize we're going to need more time. And in fact, Monka and I are working on a grant that we've got to submit next week, and we just got a letter from our community partner today where they wrote up that they're so excited to engage with us. But that grant was initially going to be due 2 weeks ago, and our group, our CTIS search group said, people are struggling to connect with their community partners because the people that we are working with are caring for others. And they extended the due date. And I took the time to write them back and say, thank you. And then I called this community partner and I said, thank you. We're going to come out. We're going to spend more time meeting on it. And Monka and I and a member of our cab was there. And so just knowing that is really important. And I think part of where we've lost some of our way in care is, I go back to the man in the mirror. It says, I've been a victim of a selfish kind of love. It's time that I realize there are some with no home, not a nickel to loan. Could it be really me pretending that they're not alone? And so if we take that time to reflect on others, I think that's really important. And so one of the things, frameworks that we use sometime is the who, what, when, where, how model when we're doing assessments. And what I want you to do is just take some time this weekend, get a mirror, just be honest with yourself, and just ask about and think about your world and who you're caring from. And so you can ask, who are the people and groups involved with my life? Just jot them down, okay? And this is not a exercise in judging yourself, feeling shame, feeling guilt. It's just who's in my world, let's say Monday through Friday and then the weekend. And then ask yourself, what do I care about? Where do I invest my time, my talents, and my treasures? Who do I show up for and speak out for? Why do I take action? What helps me move from reading a story or watching the news that I rise up and I leave out of the comfort of my home and take action? And when we think about the world that we want to create, a world based in care, it's really important that we understand what our strengths, our purposes, our passions, and our opportunities are to work for change and to make that change. We also have to take care of ourselves. And one of the things I encourage people to do is build your toolbox. And your toolbox can have many things in it. And people are like, Robin, you seem fine. I said, no, I'm just very highly functioning, and I'm using every tool I've acquired. That tool includes having a counselor. It includes being a part of a women's game night group. It includes being on 3 different text message chains where we share inspirational strategies. It includes time with children, which just open your heart, time in nature, time in the water. So during this time, for all of us, we need to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others. And I always ask people, and maybe I'll ask you today, since we're a small kind of intimate group here, how many of you have your, if you drive and have that privilege in a car, how many of you have like less than 2 gallons of gas in your car? Anybody on just E? Okay. All right. Nobody's on E. Okay. How about how many of you with your cell phone, if you take a look, how many people are in the 10% range? Anybody that 10% right now? Okay. Somebody may be, but they don't want to say. But here's the point. When we think about our cars and we think about our phones, we do not let them deplete. And I am still learning this lesson at 62. Do we want to bring what's left of ourselves? Again, what is left of ourselves, that last ounce? Or do we want to bring the best of ourselves? And we have to have that self-care so that we can care for others and be there to support each other. And so I want to just encourage that. And then the only other one that I want to talk about is in terms of care. The work of care is kindness. Kindness is all important in providing care to patients, families, and communities. Kindness is based upon wholeness, not separateness. When we do us and they, when I say my group but the other group, you know, we have to be inclusive in our mirror because sometimes we're not even realizing we say this is our priority, but you go through your phone. Did you spend any time on those priorities with those people, with different people? Or do you go from your office and you go home and you're in that neighborhood until you come out on Monday? Okay? Because there's a lot of people that can use the different types of talents that you have. And so I ask you to ask yourself, because we're doing this work internally here, when you look in the mirror, who do you see? And do you see one and think about holistic, or do you see separate? And then who's not in your mirror that you want to have in that mirror? Part of kindness, in addition to it being whole, kindness is not based on a person's education, their income, their zip code, employment status, job title, race, ethnicity, absence or presence of healthcare insurance, religious affiliation, views, or practice, or political affiliation, views, and practice. Their views on exercising their Second Amendment rights, their nationality, or their immigration status. And so when you are looking at providing care and centering that on kindness, that's where you want to make sure that we're seeing everybody. Because you can't do care if you don't see people, value people, respect people, and listen to people. And so when we put that kind lens on, we are able to access our empathy, our compassion. It ignites us to take action, and we are able to repair and heal our world when we don't separate and we come together. And so let's protect and be there for our neighbors. Let's look whole, find those commonalities. We have many more things that join us than separate us. And the more that we can bring kind, it is the only thing that can be a weapon against the darkness. Darkness and darkness and flesh fights. No one wins. We have to bring our light and our talents. And when we bring that and we gather together, I am so proud of Minnesota stepping up. Because not everybody was up for everybody. I mean, you just think about it. But we have now saw when one of us is at risk, we're all at risk. And I hate the tragic circumstances that have elevated it, but people have risen to the occasion of what kind of world they want to live in, what kind of neighbors they have. And they recognize that they can't live a good life when others are suffering and facing injustice. So take a look in the mirror. Don't judge yourself. We're just all doing a self-assessment. You don't even have to tell me or nobody about it. And come from kindness and wholeness and talk to those people that have different views. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
That was great.
Little Michael Jackson action, that's very good.
Yes, I wish I could sing.
Last but not least, Joe Gogler, Distinguished McKnight University Professor, Robert L. Kane Endowed Chair in Long-Term Care and Aging, School of Public Health. Joe?
Well, thank you. I actually enjoyed and learned so much in listening to my colleagues here on the panel, and perhaps to, I'm sure, your great happiness, I have very little to add. And so in favor of going to a panel discussion, I don't have much to say. You know, a lot of the terms I really resonated with and here in, neoliberalism, worshiping at the altar of data, particularly quantitative data. You heard Ty mention messiness and humility. You heard Maka really emphasize the whole notion of community-centered, community-based work, and you heard Robin really tie things together so masterfully in terms of, I think, really giving us lessons to live by. And when I was asked to be part of this panel, it's somewhat of a challenge because really my whole career has been focused on care, at least from an academic perspective. But in reflecting on these wonderful comments here by my colleagues, I've also realized how much I've had to unlearn. When I was first trained in my doctorate studies, it was kind of really in the traditional way that Ty was mentioning, positioning myself to, the kind of expected move towards tenure and putting out these publications that nobody reads, et cetera, et cetera. But when I reflect back and I think of the turning point, not just of my career, but maybe all of the work we're doing together, and I've had such a privilege to work with people like Robin Fraser and Dr. Kim Bang on a day-to-day basis at the Center for Healthy Aging and Innovation, or CHI, it really came from the stories of the caregivers themselves. My work is, again, like Robin, focused in dementia care. And I remember, seeing Dr. Raquel Rodriguez here really led me to think about that experience and the turning point in my career and work, which was, we had a study. Yes, Ty, it was a federally funded study, and we had to recruit people. So I felt, well, you know what? I'll do a conference. We'll get some people to come to the conference. It'll be educational. But the goal wasn't selfishly was to try to identify people for this study to meet the funders' goals and objectives, right? So we started the Caring for People with Memory Loss conference back in 2008. And we just did word of mouth. Hey, does anyone want to come to this conference, learn more about how to care for someone with memory loss, support caregivers? Around 80 to 90 people showed up at the door. And we did very little promotion. And the thing that I'll never forget is at the end of that conference, how many people came up to me and said, you can't stop doing this. You have to keep doing this. And it really, I guess, was a light bulb moment for me. And again, when we're thinking of this whole idea of care and what does it mean to care both in a professional way and personal way was I had to unlearn how I did my work. And I had to start to show up for families, for people living with dementia, and often show up where they were at, not where I was at. So it's been almost 20 years later, and the conference has continued every year. And we get now 300 to 400 people a year, and some people have attended that conference, some people have benefited from it. And when I look back and think about it, I'm glad we're doing the event and it's of value to so many, but it's been of value to me more than anybody else because it helped me really reframe the work I do and how it can potentially support those who care. Not to be too neoliberal about it, but when we think of the space, the sheer space that care occupies in our country, even in dementia, there are around 11 to 12 million people caring for someone living with dementia in the U.S. If you put a dollar value on that, and again, that doesn't even begin to reflect what caregivers do. I understand that. But if we had to hire people to do what families did, that economic dollar value is around half the revenue of Walmart in any given year. It's 9 to 10 times the revenue of McDonald's in any given year. Again, I'm sorry to be neoliberal about it, but nonetheless, it shows how important care is. But to understand care, to understand how to support those who care, I think it requires a certain approach philosophically, politically perhaps, and certainly from a research standpoint that's much different than how we're trained. You heard Ty mention messiness, for example. Understanding the value of different forms of information and data that are often the voices of the people that we purport to want to help and work with. Whether those are qualitative methods or whatnot, and how do we incorporate that work. Is any of the work we're doing actually impacting and benefiting anybody outside of our own academic circles? And with that in mind, how can we, as those in an academic space, and again, I totally resonate with what Ty's talking about, we have to be collaborative and not necessarily see ourselves at the top of some type of pyramid. But nonetheless, how can we be and show up in the communities and places that are caring to better shape our own work? And so, that led me to what I'm doing now, which is visiting every county in Minnesota to provide, at face value, education about Alzheimer's and dementia, but as importantly, to hear about the lived experiences of what people are going through. I remember very clearly when I was giving one of these presentations, this predated the county visits, but there was a woman living with dementia in the audience, and she was there with her care partner, her daughter. And as I was done with the talk, she raised her hand, and she started shaking. She had her fist. She was crying. And what she was saying is, doctors like you are why I'm in the situation I'm in. And, as an academic, you're not prepared for that type of question, that type of emotional response from an audience. But when I get those types of questions and responses, it makes me reflect what is broken about our systems. Again, we can talk about political systems, we can certainly talk about healthcare systems that is not meeting the needs of this particular woman. Or when I go to these rural communities or to communities of color, immigrant communities. When thinking about care as this concept and construct, I think what I've also had to learn, and again, I really enjoyed Ty's comments, is we can see it through the lens of loss and what's broken and what needs to be done. But every time I visit a county, every time we have our conference, I've been so taken aback at the resilience and the innovation that's happening too in ways that we don't necessarily value. I remember very clearly, and I'll stop here, I promise, Victor, because I know we want to get to your provocative questions, which are, I went to this one town, and it was Madison, Minnesota. And I was to speak at a place called the Madison Mercantile, and I had no idea what it was. So I went in, and it ended up being this old market that was converted. There was this champion in the community. She had gotten some, she was a nonprofit. She had gotten some grants, and she converted this old market. It was in the shadow of these grain bins in this small town. The town maybe had, I don't know, 800 to 1,000 people. She converted it where she had a men's shed. She had a support group. She had art. She had all of these different things that she brought to bear to benefit the community. I never heard of the Madison Mercantile. I had no idea it existed. But I would never have known that if I hadn't gone and showed up to where it was happening. And so when I think as a professional and being a professional carer, being a professional academic interested in caring, I've really become convinced, and again, I can go on and on ad nauseum how I think academics don't do this enough, where we can write papers, analyze our data, and disseminate it. If we're not going out into the communities we're purporting to work with and benefit, we never will achieve public health impact. And in the end, I think that's what's care about. I think that's what I think care is about when I reflect on my own career. So thank you.
Good job. Well, thanks to our panelists for these great initial remarks. And I want to invite the audience to start thinking about questions or comments that they may have. And just so that I know how deep into my own questions, so I can go, if people already have some questions, could you just kind of let me know that you're going to be ready to ask some questions just by show of hands? I see one, a couple there. Okay, very good. So I know there are going to be microphones coming around, so I presume. Yes, microphones are on the ready, so you saw that there's some people there. So I'm just going to ask a question that I actually had not prepared, but in hearing what you all have to say, one of the things that I heard is there's a key word, or maybe it's a series of words, but one of the key words that I heard was with. It's very difficult to do, the individualist imagination of community, going from being alone to being with. The idea of conducting research or doing activities to try to improve the situation with people. The idea of partnering with communities and understanding what needs to be done and what needs to go forward with people, Ubuntu, solidarity, togetherness, but also with your whole self. And then the notion that you are only going to be able to understand when you are with people where they are. Feels that this word with seems integral to this notion of that we're seeing here as care. And I felt I heard from all of you this notion of you're seeing the world or your work through this lens of care. Care has this cultural valence to be a feminine response, which has been taken to the extreme to allocate the difficult, private, isolating, messy. By the way, you talk to a South American, you say you're attracted to Messi. I'm thinking of the Argentinian player. I'm not thinking about the messiness of things. I just had to reframe. Yeah. But and all of that private, messy, difficult, isolating, dirty, unrecognized work. So while maybe politically we're celebrating, and economically we're celebrating our enormous productivity, behind the scenes, there's always been women doing the work of caring and supporting. How are you all, I don't know who wants to pick this up, but how are you seeing the role of, and then you highlighted that social workers are mostly women, right? So is this something that we double down on and we emphasize? Are we interested in a more democratic distribution of the work of care? I don't know who wants to pick that up. You can fight on it, or you can just pick up the microphone. I'm looking for a brief answer, so I don't do the whole dissertation on that.
Yeah, I would just say that, when people are dreaming about what they want to be when they grow up and what they want to do, and then they know that a price tag for a college, ours is of course better here, but a private college is, might run them $60,000, some are $70,000. That impacts what the person does. And I think part of what we need to look at is how we better compensate, but also recognize the critical care that is given, especially those on the front lines. There were people that never went home for months during COVID. They could not leave, and they didn't know everything. The data was changing all of the time, but we celebrated some, but not all. And so lots of times getting to like, where is that hierarchy at, like you spoke about, we're celebrating the doctors, sometimes with the nurses there, but at the end of the day, after having a mother that we finally had to place in assisted living, let me tell you, the care is that CNA there, that person distributing the medications and that. And because the care was so low for my mother, because in part people aren't attracted to it, they're not rewarded for it, it's not viewed as nobly as other things, she didn't have people there. And she said, I don't like the quality of life. I'm stopping dialysis. And she passed away 3 weeks later. And so when we think about care, and we've already had this discussion in my family, it's like if we are not at a certain level of care, it is not our goal to live as long as possible. It is to live productively and to have a quality of life. And many of our people, and it was my mom's dialysis, 6 a.m. time, and all the jobs that we couldn't get her there. That's the only reason we looked at it. And I had always told families, look at it. They're so stressed out. I see them, and they're caring for 2 or 3 people. But we ended up hiring a nurse for $3,000, paying the facility $4,000, and my mother still suffered and didn't have it and said, I'm done. Now, thank God she did that, but we are still haunted by that. So I think we need to your point, we need to look and have different paths so it's not just a flat way, because so many people have so many talents, like with nurturing people and getting them engaged in things. There needs to be those career paths, and those are the people that we need to lift up, because a lot of people drop down into care, okay?
Yeah.
Get the education, they drop down. They're not born of. And we need to take that. And the other thing is, with the shortages that we have in the workforce, we have so many people that are immigrants, and I know doctors that ran their own clinics that are community health workers. Okay, we have resources. If we can get over the nationality or the race or the immigration status, we have people right here that have come here for opportunities where they are using 1/10 of their talent, because it's going to take you 15 years to go to medical school, go get the residency, and do all of this. But guess what? You were running that clinic in Bolivia. So that's why we've got to open up and look at the talent, because we are wasting resources. So we need to get more talent. We need to lift up, and we need to pay. And it needs to be honorable, that somebody's like, great for you that you're doing that.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
I think it's great. One of the challenges that I think is in your words is also the fact that some of the immigration that has occurred, particularly south to north, is actually a care drain on the global south. And
Yes.
particularly women of color and immigrants that have been
Yes.
shouldering up the work of care in the Northern Hemisphere, as women in the Northern Hemisphere have, because of the neoliberal order, have found that the only path to realization is actually to join the productive sector. Right? But it's also this I'm going to insist on my question, this sort of distribution of the care responsibility and task,
Yes.
which is everything you said, unrecognized and a path down and so forth. The distribution is not according to the expectation. you know, one potentially could have a rule of thumb that if you expect to receive care, then you should understand that you have an obligation to give it. But that's not how we distribute that, don't we? I mean, we distribute it different. I don't know if somebody else wants to add something. I think Ron was very, very clear, but you seem ready.
No, I will just say, I wanted to come back to this point about women and their disproportionate amount of care that they are providing often for their families, and be it through childcare, with their older parents and et cetera. And I think that we have taken the idea of social reproduction and caregiving and made it separate from the economy, as though that social reproduction supports the economy. And until we see the whole thing as one unified
Yes.
aspect, that social reproduction is part of the economy. And that kind of envisioning, we can actually reward the work of people who engage in this, who are often women, but then maybe also encourage men to take up as much care as women have.
Yeah, I think men have been culturally told that they're bad at caring.
You know, I think, I really appreciate those points, and, I mean, I don't know, you know, the term we haven't mentioned, but it resonates with me, I don't know if it resonates with you or anyone in the audience, is the idea of care is infrastructure. I mean, and you saw what happened politically with the Biden infrastructure bill, where the care elements that were originally to be part of that bill, which were admittedly modest, but they were in there, were stripped out. And they couldn't get bipartisan support unless that care piece was taken out. But if we really think and think about what does infrastructure mean, it is care. I mean, we can't avoid that. And the idea of making it part of the economy is, I mean, when we think of policy pathways and where we're going to aspire to in elevating care as what is essential, we know it's essential. I think I really resonate a lot, and I have to do more thinking about it, but it is infrastructure and making the case, and maybe we should talk about it more that way in our research, but in our talking about it and discussion. So yes, thank you.
I think many people would like to keep care as poetry, and then as an aspirational and as cloud, but it is fundamental, and the economy will not be able to be productive if those people who are claim to be self-made begin to recognize that they are where they are because somebody chose to care for and about them. There was a question there, and so we can start with that question. Microphone coming right at you.
I actually have two.
You get one, I'm sorry. Now, if it's good, you might get a second.
I'm Lola. I am a healthcare management student here at the University of Minnesota. I have one question, well, two. If care is fundamentally democratic and relational, what would healthcare leaders be brave enough to stop doing? Because I hear a lot of what we should do, but what should we stop doing?
Very good. And you may get the second question because you put a nice LinkedIn post yesterday, so you may get a second question. So what, anybody wants to pick that up?
Ty, Monica, anybody?
Joe, you seem
I
ready
was
to go.
hoping you
I'd
would
like to
answer
hear
the
it.
question.
Yeah. Who's that, me? Thank you. I was waiting to hear, I mean, because like I said, I've been learning so much on the panel, I'm kind of eager to hear others' responses. I personally believe, and I think it's in line with some of the comments here, is where possible, breaking the silo between the healthcare system and the community. We know in dementia, research has shown this, there are now programs being disseminated to support this. Optimal care for an older person living with dementia or other chronic conditions does not occur solely in some healthcare system and environment. It happens as much, if not more so, in the community, at home. So as a healthcare leader, do you know what's out there in the community? I can't tell you how much, and again, this is from people living with dementia and care partners themselves when I go out into the counties. They always will say things, and I hear this both from people caring as well as professionals, you know, I don't know what to do. You know, I won't screen someone for dementia, or, you know, my primary care provider won't screen for dementia because they don't know what to do. So we won't do it. But I kind of step back and I say, well, why don't you know what to do? There are community resources that could be leveraged to optimize and, like Robin was saying, live the best possible life with dementia or other chronic conditions if you know what's out there in the community and leverage them. Whether it's Meals on Wheels, whether it's the local church, whether it's the local senior center, whether it is the Agency on Aging. And the degree in siloing where healthcare systems and professionals know nothing about it is distressing to me. But again, and this is in a very small way, it's not the only path, but in a very small way, I think research, but then when you look at those models that are most successful, those approaches and programs that are most successful, they incorporate that community. It's with community, and it's incorporated in the models. I'm sure, Ty, you have something
Yeah,
to say
if
about this.
I could just jump in, I mean, I think that a lot of times we forget that the other 23 and a half hours of our patient's day are not in our offices, right? And I think that a lot of care structures are consistent with that top-down provider consumer, model that I think all of us are pretty familiar with, is we miss that, right? I think that in an acute situation, like if I broke my leg, I'm happy to be a passive recipient of somebody's expertise. I'll go to the emergency room and I will just sit there and be cooperative, probably on a little bit of anesthesia while somebody fixes me. But most of what people are seeking care for are arguably not acute things. I mean, they're chronic things that a physician, whoever that physician is, certainly plays a role in a much bigger mosaic after the patient leaves. Right?
Yes.
In the context of their family, somebody that they're living with, that they're sharing the budget for the food with, that they're maybe exercising with or not exercising with that broader community and everything that means. I don't think that we teach our healthcare providers that because we teach them how to be the expert that, chooses especially in social science, you can't walk down the hall without having a theory that justifies you using it. You better put it in your grant proposal, right? 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 And then you're doing the intervention while, they're, and I don't want to belabor that, but
Please don't.
I could.
No, don't, it's okay.
I think that overlaps, though, to another, bigger thing that maybe we need to think about is the ways that we socialize gender in the healthcare professions, that there is an inverse relationship between the emotional sides of the work, the caring sides of the work, and the status and the income of the specialty. I mean, most pediatricians are women. Most family docs, family medicine, are women. And if you go into the specialties, say you pass up, let's just skip to tertiary care. I mean, I was just doing primary care. But, you go into the secondary care where there's a lot more money and a lot more status, and you go into tertiary care where there's even more money and more status. Those are boys' clubs. Those are men. And it tends to be pretty individual patient focused at that point. A lot of tests, analysis, procedures. Go to an ER. I just broke my leg, like I was saying. That's secondary care, but you're going to see a lot less women there than you will in peds. And I think that there's kind of some overlays here as it relates to missing the contexts that our patients inhabit and the ways that we socialize gender and who's offering the care in the first place.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that the work that I do on the side, which is this idea of how do we move away from industrialized healthcare to careful and kind of care for all in the healthcare system, is a reflection of the fact that people come into healthcare for care and they rarely get it, but they get these tests and they get these treatments and they get processed through, and that stands for the care, but it's not real. Arthur Kleinman, one of the fathers of medical anthropology and an expert on care, particularly transcultural care and care in China and other places, his wife developed dementia. And he wrote a book about the years of caring for his wife. The last chapter of that book, and he was a Harvard Medical School professor, so taught generations of future Harvard physicians about care. And he would show up with his wife to the neurologists, Harvard-trained neurologists, his students, and he was bitter that he would not get the care, that they had no practical knowledge about how to assist him and his wife.
I believe it.
In doing this. So that's my angle. Jessica, you want to?
I just want to highlight something that, Ty, that you touched on, which was that we need to be paying the people who provide professional care a living wage. And social workers are not earning a living wage, and they are, mental health, HMOs are a major way in which we get paid, and we are not at the table when they are deciding what the remuneration is for social workers. So that's one thing. I think that all of these care professions need to be earning a living wage, and if you want to keep people in a job and not see turnover and burnout and et cetera, you need to pay them that. So I think that's something that folks should be thoughtful about.
Yeah, I think we should come back to the issues of visibility and recognition of care work across the board, not just as a profession, but also in general, which I think is what has historically contributed to it being accumulated mostly in women.
Yeah. And I think also it's an opportunity as we think about how we recognize and compensate care staff. We can have policies in there where you are earning credits for your daycare. If you're caring for someone, we could take some of these professions where when you look at the money, I've got 2 great grandkids in daycare, they're $1,200, $1,200 a piece. So how do you go and get a job when your child care is going to be $2,400? Now, let's say if I'm in this type of role, part of the way we recognize that is through a funding for education that is made for those children and tax credits and those things that are applied. So it all doesn't have to be the hard dollars, because we know the people in the power that have the hard dollars want to keep the hard dollars. But you can make policy changes of what you do, even with the care that they get. Because often people are asked to give a level of care. Guess what? They don't have the insurance themselves.
Yeah, they cannot get the care they need.
So I think that's where linking in policy is how we build out and recognize everyone that is a part of that infrastructure.
Excellent. There is another question, and then if there's another, we can come back to Lola. But was there, or are you want to try again? So somebody else wants to ask a question. I would like to hear someone else, but if not, we can come back to you. You have a question up here? Yeah. And then we can come back to you, okay? Yeah. Wait for the microphone. Okay. Yeah, there it is, yes.
Thank you. And more than a question is, I love this interdisciplinary approach. My question is, or my comment is, what can we do to multiply our effort? Because this is happening around the planet. It's not just in Minnesota, it's not just in the United States. What can we do to multiply our efforts and plant seeds on different communities with multidisciplinary experts like you that can be identified, that they can help move this in each community, and then we have a multiplying effort on this problem that we have. And it's very complex. It's not just political, it's educational. We talk about the gender bias. What can we do to educate our children so that we can all become better caregivers, even for ourselves, you know? What can we do in that aspect? What can we do about policies? What can we do? Do we have, I presume, I am not involved in that, I presume our politicians, our representatives, have people like you in their committees that give them advice on what things can be done. So my question is, how can we, or what can we do
To spread.
to spread this?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I suspect that politicians don't have people like this in their committees. I think they wouldn't be in their office. I want Manka to tell us a little bit about, you said that you came from a place where, you know, it's Ubuntu, it's assumed, it's in the culture, it's in the water, I guess. How does that get maintained? Because I presume it got spread a long time ago. How does it get maintained? Because I suspect Cameroon is under the same influence of neoliberal policies as every other country, right? I mean, the World Bank has been around, and you know, these other people are around. So how is that maintained there?
So it is culture, and if we think about how culture is transmitted, it's a lot of different processes, and it goes back to the word that you've been talking a little bit about, with. So as you sit with, as you talk with, as especially for the African immigrants, as you break bread with, that's how things are transmitted, and that's how ideas are shared, that's how things are built, that's how things are formed, that's how developments are formed. So if you think of back home in Cameroon where I grew up, this every Sunday, which for the work that I do, a lot of older adults have to go back home all the time, those who are here, because they miss it. Every Sunday is meeting day. So all the older adults from, if it's you're Muslim from the masjid, you go back and you start going from one community association meeting to another. If you're from the church, you go. So it's like those little meetings where they're going from one home to another, one home to another. And that's how they're breaking bread, that's how they're getting social connection, that's how they're sharing and learning about what's happening in the community, because they're hearing what happened during the week from other parts of the neighborhood. That's where all of the ideas are forming, and then they leave from those, they go home to their family members, and then they leave from those, and they go to work the next day, and then the next week they come back and they do the exact same thing. So it's really just coming together in community to do that work. And that's exactly what I was thinking about in response to your question. How can this start being scaled up? So it's really thinking about, for community-based participatory research, is thinking about what is the idea that you have, and thinking about how do you start by networking with the person who might share an interest in that idea. Then how do you develop a relationship with them and build that relationship subtly, long-term, so that you're progressively working towards something. So it often just starts by thinking about where you could find that person. So for the work that I do is African immigrants, where could I find African immigrants at a festival? So I will show up at a festival that is happening in Brooklyn Park, and I'll just walk around the festival tables. Hi, this is who I am, this is what I do. Who are you? What are you doing? I have conversations, maybe with 10 people, and 3 or 4 are interested in dementia. I follow up with those 3. I have coffee with them. We talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing, the work that they're doing. Is there a shared interest? Is there something where we can collaborate on in the future? You set up the next meeting. Maybe we're doing this thing. Can you come out and support us? Because it's always a give and take. You give, they give, and you begin to build that relationship, which is collaborative. And so you're supporting them, and they are supporting you. So it's not just being extractive where you're trying to go do what you want to do and not supporting that other person do what they want to do. So it's just starting out with building a relationship and slowly taking the time to get to know them, to get to share ideas, to get to build on those ideas and think about how do you work together in such a way that you achieve the goals that you set out to achieve from the beginning.
I want to add one more thing.
Could I just add really quick?
3 seconds.
I love that. We need to hang out. No, seriously, I mean,
I wanted to stop this. I knew this.
one of the problems with the university is that we're all doing such good work, and we don't usually get to like connect sideways as much. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But building on that, and also in response, I think that oftentimes professionals, providers, administrators, they'll hear things that sound good or sound innovative, but as soon as they hear it, it translates into their brain as not something necessarily new or innovative. It sounds like something more. And they don't have any room or time to do more. Good idea, but. Yes, but, yes, but, yes, but, yes, but. Anybody ever talk to somebody that yes, but's everything? I mean, it's so maddening. And you're never going to get anywhere with them. And so if or as, and in the Citizen Professional Center that we're connected to, and it sounds like it is very similar, is that we're looking for pressure points, that's what we call them, where we don't necessarily need to have the same reasons, but we are interested in some of the same things. So like with diabetes, for example, when we're doing the 80-20 rules in the clinic, you know, the 20% of our patients who are costing 80% of our resources, who are they and how is that happening? You know, in a couple of the clinics, it was diabetes, but the administrators were saying it's bankrupting the clinics. The patients were saying our physicians are mad at us because we're non-compliant, and they don't understand when they say, go exercise, that we don't feel safe doing that in our neighborhood, or that we don't feel that we can't afford the gym membership, right? Or, they're just missing it as they drive home in their nice cars they just have no clue, what's going on. And then the physicians are frustrated because they're, from their perspective, trying everything but not getting anywhere. And oh, here we go, the heart sync, oh, they're back, kind of thing. But we all agree that diabetes is a problem. And then we can start having a conversation about what can we do that's different in a way that saves work, saves time for the physicians, that's a payoff. That the administrators are saving money, that's a payoff. That that the patients aren't being, characterized as non-compliant and bad patients, and their health is improving, that's a payoff. Everybody wins. Everybody came to it for a different reason, right? But we rallied around a pressure point that we all shared in common somehow. And that oftentimes is the difference, because otherwise it's somebody coming to somebody else with power trying to get them to do something. And they just won't do it. They're too busy.
Yeah, I think there's also, at the same time, there's this kind of squeezing one logic inside another. And it feels in this conversation that the logic of care doesn't necessarily jive well with the logic of some of the organizations and corporations in which we have to operate. And that jarring thing forces all sorts of accommodations and arrangements that make no sense. We have time for one last question, and then we want to close up.
Okay. And I do want to mention.
We have to, we realize that, right?
Okay, I'll be very quick. One of the programs that I'm working on, they're working with faith-based communities. And here's the deal. We know what the numbers are. And while some of us are going to look in the mirror and want to step it up, and some of us are going to open hearts and minds, it's going to take time. And I believe that we need to give community the ability to identify and prioritize what is important to them, and then help support them in addressing those needs and priorities. But when a doctor only has 5 minutes to tell you about something like diabetes, or 10 minutes, it's a short window. But if you have a program in your church and that runs for 6 months, and people are coming in and talking about their successes and those things. So the programs that I'm working on are in the community.
You're always selling. You're selling.
Yes, no, I was going to say they're in the community. Here's it. Nobody's going to care about community like community. Empower community with knowledge so they can take care of themselves. And if there's no grant, guess what? I still take care, because that's where I live, work, play, pray, and live.
So one of the things that I'm hearing you say is that there's a logic in your question, which is a logic of scarcity. That this ability to care, for mutual care in particular, it needs to be developed and expanded. At the same time, I think we live in a city that's demonstrating that there is no scarcity of care, just an environment that makes it difficult to pop up. And I think we have heard from our panelists, different ways, with each one with their own passions, each one with their own disciplines, each one with their own lens to the world, that they're seeing in our communities the incredible potential for human flourishing that care harbors in it. And we're going to close because we're going to finish on time. But I want to say that the work of care is difficult. Cannot be glamorized. It is a challenge. It takes time. It takes effort. It is poorly distributed. It's not recognized. It's hidden. But it's necessary. It saves lives. Its absence, and thanks for telling the story, its absence diminishes life and living. And it takes an enormous amount of work for care to flourish and for care to be a force of flourishing. But we all get to do it. And as we look in the mirror, we're going to feel that pit in the stomach about when we decide to step up and care. And that pit in the stomach is fear. But that heat in your heart is courage. So let's go out there and care. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Robin, for being here. Really appreciate it. Monica, thank you. Really appreciate you two being able to do this.